Salve Miki. Often, Catullus is known for his influence on Ovid, his influence on Virgil, or the influence that he had in the Nove Poetae, or his many poems that are addressed to Lesbia in the romantic style and how he expresses his great love and passion for Lesbia. But often overlooked is his theme of friendship, those that he writes to and his dear friends to. So today in this video, I would like to inform you on how Catullus forms a model of friendship for us in poems 11 and 50. In poem 11, there are two parts. The first part consists of the first 4 stanzas. The second part consists of the last 2 stanzas. In the first part, Catullus addresses Furius and Aurelius, his friends, his comites, and he says, we could travel and have this great adventure. We could do all these many things, go to the extreme north, the extreme south, the extreme east. He says, you are prepared to do these things with me. But in stanza 4, we have a transitory sentence where he kind of tells them, but instead I want you to deliver this message to Lesbia. And in stanzas 5 and 6, the message is there. It's essentially this hate mail of what the great things Lesbia has done and the horrible things that Lesbia has done to Catullus. So often, scholars have a hard time connecting part 1 and part 2. But I'll propose a possible hypothesis of how to connect these two, which also gives us a model of friendship in both Furius and Aurelius and Catullus. In order to understand my possible hypothesis, it is important to understand how comites is used in the very first line. Many scholars suggest that this is supposed to be ironic, and they have many good reasons for thinking so. Especially one to note, in poem 16, Catullus addresses Furius and Aurelius in a vulgar and aggressive fashion, and clearly you wouldn't talk to your comites in such a negative way. And if it is the case that comites is supposed to be ironic, then this is a bad model of friendship. And that's why this is important to understand the meaning of comites. But I think we should suggest that comites isn't ironic. And my one main reason for thinking so is because in poem 11 we have the 2 parts, as I said earlier. And we have to understand how part 1 fits in with part 2. Well, what do we see in part 2? Catullus requests something of them. I don't think anyone would ever request something of them after insulting them and almost using a sarcastic comites. He would never ask a favor of them. And we see Catullus does ask a favor of them, meaning that this is supposed to be a sincere comites and not ironic. Now that we have an understanding of how comites is supposed to be taken, and how it's supposed to be sincere and kind of an affectionate comites, we can understand how lines 2 through 14 are to be understood. We see that Catullus says he'll travel these many places, and he'll do these many things. He'll almost do this big epic odyssey, this big journey, be a pioneer of the world. He says, essentially, he says, he's going to go to the extreme north, the extreme south, the extreme east. And then at the end of this, in line 14, he tells them, after he told them, I'll be doing all these things, he says, Temptari simul parati. In other words, you're prepared to try these things with me, together, that we may be friends and do these things and go on this big epic adventure as friends. Now, having understood lines 1 through 14, now we can kind of put a better grasp of 15 through 24. Now, if you're reading this as one of the comites for the first time, and you read lines 1 through 14, you'd be kind of convinced that you're going to go on this epic journey with Catullus. But then you read line 15, and you actually kind of get a little confused. You're kind of wondering, I'm supposed to deliver a message to your girl? Like, there's some confusion in that. Why am I doing this? Well, it's important to understand, though, that coming from and speaking of this epic journey and then delivering a message, Catullus isn't belittling this message, this delivering of the message. He's actually comparing it to being an epic odyssey, an epic journey, that you can be my great friends and you can go on this journey for me. Because, as we talked earlier, Lesbia can be kind of likened to a monster, because she holds 300 men in her arms in her embrace. She constantly, repeatedly breaks the other men's groins and is just monstrous about the way she acts. And so that's why this action delivering the message is actually going to be an epic, because you're going to the monster. You're doing something a brave man would do, especially what a brave man would do for his friend. Now that we have an understanding how part 1 fits in with part 2, how in some way delivering the message to Lesbia can be likened to this big epic odyssey and this big epic journey, we can begin to highlight the friendship traits that we see. In Catullus, we see a sense of trust and vulnerability, because Catullus is pretty much essentially saying, here's this big monster that I'm supposed to face, but I can't. I need you to deliver this message to Lesbia, because I'm unable to. I'm weak in that kind of way. And I trust you, my comites, to follow through and be faithful and follow through in this kind of act for me. On the other side, we see the friendship trait in the comites of fidelity. In many ways, Catullus highlights in the beginning part, in the first part, the fidelity. He says, I know you'll travel here with me. I know you'll travel the extreme north, the extreme south, the extreme east. Even more so, in a more meritorious, for our friendship, even in a greater way, you'll travel to the monster Lesbia for me. You'll be more faithful in that kind of way. In part 2, though, we also see how Catullus actually highlights her lack of fidelity towards him. So almost we have this black and white comparison, how these guys are extremely faithful, which allows us to see their faithfulness, but even more it highlights by having Lesbia's unfaithfulness, we can see more of their faithfulness. And we can see that these comites can be faithful and will be faithful to the vulnerable and the one that's trusting them, Catullus. And these are the key friendship traits that I see in poem 11. Now we move forward with poem 50. What do we see in poem 50? What is the setup? What is the plot, if you will? Well, at the beginning, the first 6 lines, we see that Catullus has a very good day with Catullus. They share good ideas, they write some poetry together on his tablets, and they just have a good, joyful time with some wine. And then we see Catullus goes home, and he's on his bed, and he actually tries to go sleep, but he has a hard, difficult time, he's in a lot of distress, he can't eat, and then he has this good day, this bad night, and then he wants to write to Catullus, which is what this poem is, him writing and addressing Catullus, of describing this whole scenario. One of the main problems with this poem is the interpretation of the words like ludebat, lucimus, delicatus, and census, because many people think that this is meant to be erotic. And if this is the case, then this poem can't be seen as a model of friendship, simply because if it was erotic, they're driven by their passions, and it's not true friendship. So the real question is incensus meant to be erotic? Well, often in poems like these using incensus, often amore is followed. That is, you have roused up my love, roused up love within me, sensing, giving this connotation of love or eroticism. But in this poem, we see incensus tua lopore. Your wit has roused up my heart. It's like burning within me. And this really changes the dynamic from an erotic relationship to a mere intellectual, an intellectual merely about writing poetry and this common slate. It's not meant to be erotic. Catullus, we must look at the distress that he's going through. In poem 50, Catullus expresses the distress he's going through then more than just the literal meaning of the words. He does it through his poetic skill. In one case, he uses enjambment. In lines 11 through 12, he says, "Toto domitus fore lecto verserere," which enjambment is where we take the last word of the clause and we place it in the next line, causing us to focus on this. Now, we have to ask, why are we focusing on versere? Well, in many ways, it means tossing and turning repeatedly, just a continual, like, I can't sleep in my bed. That's what it really means in this literal sense. But the enjambment causes us to focus and say, okay, there must be something more here to this word. That is, it's not just a physical distress that's going here that he can't sleep, but it's an emotional and mental distress that he's going through. That there's some more levels to this. There's more spheres in which he experiences the distress. In a similar way, we can tell by the structure, the grammatical structure of this poem, of his distress. For instance, in lines 1 through 6, the grammar is very abundantly clear. That is, there's 2 sentences. Each sentence is 3 lines each. They're in the indicative mode, and you're able to just understand what's going on and happening in these sentences without too many questions. And so we actually have to look at what's happening during that time in those 6 lines. Well, he's describing his day with Catullus. That is, the day is easy, it's relaxed, it's chill. That I'm enjoying this time, it's simple. Life is simple with Catullus. So the clear grammar and the simplicity of the day really correspond. On the other hand, in the second part of the poem, lines 7 through 21, there's subjunctive, there's all these other things. We're using enjambment, the clauses aren't as clean, maybe longer sentences. And now we have to look at what happens during this time. So a little less clear grammar, and then, well, this is when he's expressing his distress. So we see how these two correspond as the poetic, what's being described in lines 1 through 6 does correspond in the same way. Now that we understand his distress, though, we have to understand his response. That is, he says, ut tecum loque simoque ut essem. This phrase in itself is the medicine to his distress. This is his cry from his heart. This is the friendship trait. He's saying, I wish to speak and be with you, Catullus. That friendship, actually there's not too much more to it. That is, you should want to be and speak with a person, even if it be a big waste of your time, as in like it's not efficient, it's not effective, if it's a meaningless conversation, who cares? I just want to hear your wit and your charm by speaking with you. I want to hear of your heart and the many things you can write and say in the tablets again. I want that day that we had that full of leisure. And this is what Catullus is expressing his model of friendship, that he just longs to be with. At the friendship traits of Catullus, we can now begin to look at the friendship traits of Catullus. In many ways, in poem 50, Catullus is considered to be a very passive figure. And so we have to ask the question of, since he doesn't really do much in this poem, he isn't recorded, Catullus doesn't record him doing anything, how can it be a model of friendship for us? Well, it's through the third person mentioned in this poem is Nemesis, the goddess of retribution, the goddess of justice, the one that's ensuring that there's justice being paid. Well, what does Catullus, why is there a sense of justice here? Well, Catullus has been the lover, Catullus has been the beloved. And through Nemesis, Catullus is suggesting that they switch, that Catullus be the lover and Catullus the beloved. And so in many ways, Catullus is encouraging Catullus to do as they did in the day full of leisure. That is, redens mutua, exchange ideas, give to each other. It's this giving and receiving that we see in the model of Catullus, that this is what we owe to our friends, that it's not just a one-way street, but it's a two-way street. There's this constant giving and receiving, and that's what friendship entails. And this is the model that we see in Catullus.